Lieutenant Zach Miller stood at the observation deck of the exploration vessel Horizon *. His eyes were fixed on the swirling orange and blue planet that filled the view screen. The ship's sensors had picked up strange energy readings from this unexplored world, designated NGC 7729. "Captain Wright, you need to see this," Zach called over his shoulder, not taking his eyes off the screen. Captain Laura Wright walked up beside him. Her short blonde hair was neatly tucked behind her ears, and her blue eyes narrowed as she studied the readings. "Those energy spikes are unlike anything in our database," she said. "What do we know about this planet?" Zach tapped the screen, bringing up the limited information they had. NGC 7729. Oxygen-rich atmosphere, suitable for human life. But it's marked with a warning from the Galactic Council. The door to the bridge slid open, and Dr. Alan Foster, the ship's xenobiologist, entered. His glasses were slightly askew, as usual. "Did someone say warning?" Alan asked, his curiosity immediately sparked. Captain Wright nodded. "The Council has this planet flagged as extremely dangerous. Restricted access." "That only makes me more interested," Alan said with a smile. Laura pulled up the communication logs. A message from the Galactic Council appeared on screen. It was short but clear. Planet NGC 7729 houses life forms designated as Pyrians. 3 previous expeditions from Council species have been destroyed. No survivors. Do not approach. "Well, that's certainly direct," Zach said. The ship's communication officer, Susan Bell, turned in her chair. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Council. They must have detected our approach." A stern-faced alien appeared on screen. His blue skin and ridged forehead marked him as an Aquarian, one of the oldest species in the Council. "Human vessel Horizon *. You are approaching a restricted area. Turn back immediately. The creatures on NGC 7729 cannot be reasoned with. They are pure destruction." Captain Wright stepped forward. "This is Captain Laura Wright. We're on a peaceful exploration mission. What exactly are these Pyrians?" The Aquarian's expression darkened. "Monsters. Massive beasts that breathe plasma and destroy everything in their path. No species has ever successfully made contact. The last expedition was from my people. We lost an entire battleship." "With all due respect," Laura replied, "humans have a different approach to first contact." "Your species' overconfidence will get you killed," the Aquarian warned. "We lost a ship with our most advanced weapons. The Vrexians lost their best hunters. Even the Zorth could not communicate with them." Dr. Foster stepped into view. Perhaps that was the problem. "You all approached with weapons and hunters." The Aquarian cut the transmission abruptly. Laura turned to her crew. "Opinions?" "We should go," Zach said without hesitation. "If these Pyrians are as powerful as the Council claims, think of what we could learn." "It's clearly dangerous," Susan argued. 3 expeditions with no survivors is a bad sign. Dr. Foster adjusted his glasses, but none of those expeditions were human. Our history is filled with examples of us forming bonds with dangerous creatures. Dogs were once wolves, after all. Laura thought for a moment. "We'll establish orbit and observe. No landing until we understand what we're dealing with." The Horizon * moved into orbit around NGC 7729. From space, they could see vast forests and mountains, oceans of deep purple, and strange formations that glowed with inner light. It didn't take long to spot the Pyrians. The ship's cameras caught sight of a massive creature soaring through the sky. It was enormous, at least 50 meters long, with scales that shimmered between orange and blue. Great wings spread wide as it circled a small settlement visible in a clearing. "Is that a Council outpost?" Zach asked. Before anyone could answer, the Pyrian opened its mouth. A jet of what looked like liquid fire poured out, but the sensors indicated it was actually superheated plasma. The settlement was engulfed instantly. The bridge fell silent as they watched the destruction unfold. "Still want to make friends with that?" Susan asked quietly. Dr. Foster's eyes were wide with wonder rather than fear. "Did you see how precisely it targeted just the buildings? It avoided the surrounding forest completely. That's not mindless destruction. That's intelligence." Captain Wright made her decision. "Prepare a landing team and a shuttle. We're going down there." "Captain," Zack said, "you saw what it did." Laura turned to him with a determined smile. "Yes, I did. And now I want to know why." The landing shuttle touched down in a clearing 3 miles from where they had seen the Pyrrhian attack. Dr. Alan Foster was the first one out, his equipment bag slung over his shoulder. Captain Laura Wright and Lieutenant Zack Miller followed close behind, along with Officer Kate Donovan, who kept her hand near her weapon. "Remember, we observe only," Captain Wright said firmly. "No one approaches these creatures if we spot them." Dr. Foster nodded, but his eyes were already scanning the horizon. The air on NGC 7729 was warm and smelled like cinnamon. Strange plants with purple leaves surrounded them, and in the distance they could see mountains that seemed to glow from within. "The settlement that was destroyed wasn't council-made," Zack said, checking his scanner. "The materials were native to this planet." "You mean something lies here besides the Pyrrhians?" Kate asked. Dr. Foster knelt down to examine the soil. "Look at these track marks. They're huge." The team followed the tracks to what remained of the settlement. Most buildings were now just black ash, but a few stone structures still stood. Dr. Foster took samples and readings while the others secured the area. "These buildings weren't made by the Pyrrhians," he said after a while. "The doors are too small. There must be other intelligent life here." A sound like thunder rolled across the sky. The team looked up to see a Pyrrhian flying overhead. Its massive body blocked the sun for a moment as it passed. "Everyone stay still," Captain Wright ordered. The Pyrrhian circled once, then flew away toward the mountains. "Did you see the markings on its neck?" Dr. Foster asked excitedly. "Blue patterns, different from the one we saw from the ship. They're individuals, not just a species." For the next 3 days, the team set up a small research outpost near the edge of a forest. Dr. Foster spent hours watching the Pyrrhians through high-powered scopes. He noted their behaviors, their flight patterns, and the way they interacted with each other. "They're not random in their attacks," he told Captain Wright on the evening of the 3rd day. "They only target certain settlements. Others they fly right over without a second look." "What's different about the ones they attack?" she asked. "I'm not sure yet, but I have a theory. I think they're protective, not aggressive." That night, as everyone slept, Dr. Foster heard a strange sound outside his tent. He grabbed his scanner and stepped out into the purple moonlight of NGC 7729. There, not 50 feet away, was a young Pyrrhian. It was smaller than the others they had seen, maybe 20 meters long instead of 50. Its scales were more blue than orange, and it watched the camp with what looked like curiosity. Dr. Foster stood very still. The Pyrrhian moved closer, its large eyes fixed on him. Then it did something unexpected. It lowered its head to the ground, as if trying to appear less threatening. "Hello there," Dr. Foster said softly. The Pyrrhian tilted its head at the sound of his voice. Slowly, Dr. Foster took a step forward. The Pyrrhian didn't move away. Another step. Still it watched him. A voice behind him nearly made him jump. "What are you doing?" It was Kate, her hand on her weapon. The Pyrrhian's head shot up, and its throat began to glow. "Don't." Dr. Foster held up his hand to Kate. "Lower your weapon. It senses your fear." Kate hesitated, then slowly lowered her gun. The glow in the Pyrrhian's throat dimmed. "It's not attacking because we're not threatening it," Dr. Foster whispered. "That's why the other expeditions failed. They came armed for war." Before they could say more, a loud alarm blared from the camp. The Pyrrhian reared back and then shot into the sky in a blur of blue and orange. Zack ran toward them. "We have visitors," he said. "A Galactic Council ship just entered orbit. They're demanding we leave immediately. Captain Wright emerged from her tent, her face set in a determined expression. Tell them we've made a breakthrough. We found a way to approach the Pyrians peacefully. They won't care, Kate said. They're scared of these creatures. Dr. Foster looked up at the sky where the young Pyrian had disappeared. Then we'll have to show them there's nothing to fear. The Galactic Council ship landed half a mile from the human camp. Ambassador Gexel Thorne stepped out, flanked by 4 guards in heavy armor. He was tall with gray skin, and 6 fingers on each hand. His eyes were narrow slits that showed no emotion. Captain Laura Wright went to meet them, with Lieutenant Zach Miller and Dr. Alan Foster at her side. You were instructed to avoid this planet, Gexel Thorne said. His voice was cold. The Council has ordered your immediate withdrawal. With respect, Ambassador, we've made progress with the Pyrians, Laura replied. Dr. Foster has observed their behavior and believes they aren't mindlessly aggressive. Zelthorn's face showed disbelief. 3 species tried before you. All failed. All died. What makes humans different? Dr. Foster stepped forward. We approached without weapons or threats. Last night, a young Pyrian came to our camp. It was curious, not hostile. Impossible, one of the guards muttered. I have recordings, Dr. Foster said, holding up his scanner. The Pyrian only became defensive when it sensed fear and saw weapons. Telethorn frowned. Show me. Back at the camp, they watched Dr. Foster's recording of the young Pyrian. The council members whispered among themselves as they saw how it had lowered its head and responded to Foster's voice. This means nothing, Exhalethorn said after it ended. A juvenile specimen, perhaps not yet fully aggressive. You must leave before the adults destroy you. Give us time, Captain Wright argued. 30 days to prove our approach works. The Council will not risk a diplomatic incident if you die, Exhalethorn replied. Dr. Foster had been quiet, thinking. Now he spoke up. What if we found a way to communicate with them? To understand why they attack some settlements but not others? Madness, Exhalethorn said. But your species is known for its stubborn nature. He paused. 30 days. No more. I will remain with my ship to observe. After the ambassador left, Laura turned to her team. Well, we have 1 month to tame dragons. Any ideas? Dr. Foster nodded. I've been analyzing sounds around the Pyrian nests in the mountains. They communicate with low-frequency rumbles that our ears can barely detect. I think I can create a device to mimic them. For the next week, Dr. Foster worked day and night on his device. It looked like a small speaker attached to a computer. When he turned it on, it made a deep sound that humans could feel more than hear. Now we wait, he said, placing the device at the edge of their camp. They didn't wait long. The next morning, the young Pyrian returned. It circled the camp 3 times, then landed near the device. Its head tilted as it listened to the sounds. Dr. Foster slowly approached, carrying another small speaker. The Pyrian watched him but didn't show signs of aggression. I'm going to call you Ember, Dr. Foster said softly. He pressed a button on his speaker, and it made a gentle rumbling sound. To everyone's amazement, Ember responded with a similar sound from deep in its throat. From the council ship, Exhalethorn and his team watched through binoculars. The human is too close, one guard said. The creature will kill him. But Ember didn't attack. Instead, it moved closer to Dr. Foster, sniffing the air around him. He's establishing trust, Captain Wright explained to Exhalethorn, who had come to their camp to see for himself. No species has tried this approach before. Because it is foolish, Exhalethorn replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Dr. Foster continued his careful approach every day. By the end of the 2nd week, he could stand within 10 feet of Ember without any signs of distress from the creature. Then one morning, Foster noticed something strange on Ember's scales. Small, worm-like parasites clustered near its throat. That's why they breathe plasma, he said excitedly to Captain Wright. They're trying to burn off the parasites. And those settlements they attack, I bet they have these parasites too. Thorn overheard this. What are you suggesting? Dr. Foster turned to him, eyes bright with discovery. The Pyreans are monsters. They're suffering, and they're trying to stop the spread of these parasites, the only way they know how. Dr. Alan Foster worked day and night in the small lab they had set up at the camp. He studied the parasite samples he had collected from near the camp, similar to the ones he had seen on Ember's scales. These parasites release a toxin, he explained to Captain Laura Wright, and Telthorn. It irritates the Pyrean skin and likely causes them pain. It might also affect their brains, making them more aggressive. Can you create a treatment? Laura asked. Alan nodded. I think so. A simple antiparasitic compound should work, but delivering it will be the challenge. Telthorn watched with skeptical eyes. You plan to medicate a creature that could incinerate you with a single breath. Ember trusts me now, Alan said. At least enough to let me get close. Over the next few days, Alan prepared his treatment. It was a blue gel that would kill the parasites on contact. He filled a large spray container with the gel. On the morning he planned to try the treatment, Ember arrived as usual, responding to the low-frequency sounds from Alan's device. The young Pyrean had grown comfortable enough to lie down near the edge of the camp, while Alan worked nearby. I'm going to help you feel better, Alan said softly, approaching with the spray container. Ember watched him with large, intelligent eyes. Alan slowly raised the container. Ember shifted uneasily. It's okay, Alan soothed, making a gentle rumbling sound with his device. Ember relaxed slightly. With a steady hand, Alan sprayed the blue gel onto a patch of scales where the parasites were visible. Ember flinched but didn't move away. The parasites immediately began to shrivel and fall off. It's working, Alan whispered. He continued spraying, moving carefully around Ember's body. The Pyrean remained still, as if understanding that Alan was helping. From a safe distance, the rest of the team and the council observers watched in amazement. I can't believe what I'm seeing, Telthorn said quietly. When Alan finished, Ember stood up. The Pyrean stretched its wings, then shook its massive body like a dog shaking off water. The creature's eyes seemed clearer, more focused. Ember lowered its head until it was level with Alan's. For a moment, everyone held their breath. Then, gently, Ember pressed its snout against Alan's chest in what could only be described as a gesture of thanks. You're welcome, Alan said, raising a hand to touch the Pyrean scales. Over the next week, the change in Ember was remarkable. The Pyrean began visiting the camp multiple times a day. The plasma glow in its throat appeared less often, and when it did fly over settlements, it no longer attacked. Alan continued to develop his relationship with Ember. He found that the Pyrean was intelligent enough to understand simple commands. He taught Ember to respond to hand signals, to come when called using the sound device, and even to carry small loads between the camp and the ship. Word of their success spread. More council observers arrived to witness the impossible, a human and a Pyrean working together. Officer Cape Donovan, who had been the most skeptical, finally approached Alan as he worked with Ember. I want to try, she said. Alan smiled and showed her how to use the sound device and the proper hand signals. To her surprise, Ember responded to her too, though with more caution than with Alan. By the end of the third week, 3 more crew members were regularly interacting with Ember. The Pyrean seemed to enjoy the company, playing simple games and helping with tasks around the camp. You formed a bond with it, Captain Wright said to Alan as they watched Ember help Lieutenant Zach Miller lift a heavy equipment box. More than that, Alan replied. We formed a partnership, and I think Ember might be willing to introduce us to others of its kind. Telthorn approached them, his expression troubled. The council has received word of your success. Not everyone is pleased. What do you mean? Laura asked. The Vrexians. They've always seen other species as potential weapons or tools. Now they've heard humans have tamed the most dangerous creatures known to the galaxy. Thorn looked at Ember. They're coming, and they won't be interested in friendship. The Vrexian ship arrived 3 days later. It was larger than the Council vessel, with sharp angles and weapons visible on its hull. It landed a mile from the human camp, and soon 6 Vrexians approached on foot. They walked on 2 legs like humans, but they were taller with scaled skin in shades of green and yellow. Their eyes were narrow, and their mouths filled with pointed teeth. Captain Laura Wright, Dr. Alan Foster, and Sel Thorne went to meet them. Ember watched from the edge of the camp, sensing the tension. "I am Commander Shrix," the lead Vrexian said. "We've come to observe your work with the Pyrians." "We welcome observers," Laura said carefully, "but we've heard Vrexians may have other interests." Shrix's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile. "Merely rumors. The Vrexian Empire seeks only knowledge." Thorne stepped forward. "The Council has granted humans exclusive research rights on NGC 7729. The Council does not control the galaxy," Shrix replied coldly. "We will establish our own camp nearby." That night, Alan sat with Laura and Excel Thorne in the command tent. "They want the Pyrians as weapons," Laura said. "It's obvious." Excel Thorne nodded. "The Vrexians have been expanding their territory. Pyrians would give them a powerful advantage." "We need to protect Ember and the others," Alan said. "I've been working with 2 more Pyrians. They're responding well to the treatment." The next morning, Alan went to meet with the young Pyrians as usual, but when he reached the clearing, he found signs of a struggle. Broken trees, burn marks on the ground, and drops of thick blue liquid that he recognized as Pyrian blood. He rushed back to camp. "Someone attacked the Pyrians. Ember and the others are gone." Lieutenant Zach Miller examined the clearing with his scanner. Energy weapon signatures, Vrexian design. Laura immediately called the Council ship. "We need your help. The Vrexians have taken the Pyrians." Exil Thorne arrived at their camp within the hour. "My guards saw the Vrexian ship leave orbit early this morning. They must have the creatures on board." "We have to go after them," Alan insisted. "They'll hurt them, try to control them through force." Kate Donovan pointed to the sky. "Look." A large Pyrian was circling above them. It wasn't Ember or either of the other young ones Alan had been working with. This was a full-grown adult, its wingspan nearly twice as large. The massive creature landed at the edge of the clearing. It stared at the humans, its throat glowing slightly. "Don't move," Laura whispered. Alan took a step forward. "We want to help the young ones," he said, using his sound device to make calming rumbles. The adult Pyrian tilted its head, listening. Then it lowered its body to the ground. "I think," Alan said slowly, "it wants us to get on." "You can't be serious," Exale Thorne said. "It could be a trap." "It's a parrot," Alan replied. "It knows we've been helping its young. Now it wants our help to get them back." Laura looked at the massive creature, then at her team. "How many can fit on its back?" 4, maybe 5, Alan estimated. "Prepare a rescue team," Laura ordered. "Zach, Kate, Dr. Foster, and I will go. We'll need weapons for the Vrexians, not the Pyrians." Zelthorn stepped forward. "The Council cannot officially support this action against the Vrexians. We're not asking for permission," Laura replied. "However," Higselthorn continued, "I will contact our nearest patrol ships. They may happen to be in the area when you find the Vrexian vessel." An hour later, the rescue team was ready. They climbed onto the adult Pyrian's back, securing themselves with harnesses to its scales. Alan leaned forward to speak to the creature. "We'll find them," he promised. The Pyrian spread its enormous wings and launched into the air. The force of the takeoff pushed them back against their harnesses. As they rose higher, they could see the vast landscape of NGC 7729 below them. The adult Pyrian seemed to know exactly where it was going, flying straight toward the upper atmosphere. "It's tracking the Vrexian ship," Zach shouted over the wind. It knows where they took the young ones. Alan held tight as they soared higher. "Hang on, Ember," he whispered. "We're coming for you." The adult Pyrean flew faster than any ship the humans had ever been on. The wind rushed past them as they held tightly to their harnesses. After 2 hours of flight, they saw the Phyrexian ship in the distance. It had landed on a small moon orbiting a gas giant in the same system as NGC 7729. They'd set up some kind of base, Lieutenant Zach Miller said, looking through binoculars. "I can see cages. Big ones." The adult Pyrean circled high above the base, staying out of sight. "We need a plan," Captain Laura Wright said. "We can't just fly in there." Dr. Alan Foster studied the base layout. "Those large domes must be where they're keeping the Pyreans. I see 3 guards at each entrance." "The Pyrean can create a distraction," Kate Donovan suggested. "Draw their attention while we sneak in from the other side." They explained their plan to the adult Pyrean using Alan's sound device and hand signals. The creature seemed to understand, tilting its head and rumbling in response. "It's time," Laura said. "Ready?" The adult Pyrean dove toward the far side of the base. As it approached, it let out a deafening roar and shot a stream of plasma at an empty area. Alarms blared across the base, and Phyrexian guards ran toward the attack. Meanwhile, the 4 humans dropped from the Pyrean's back onto the roof of the base and quickly found an entrance. They moved quietly through the corridors, weapons ready. "This way," Zach whispered, following the scanner that detected large life forms. They reached a massive chamber where 3 young Pyreans, including Ember, were held in energy cages. The creatures looked distressed, their scales dull and their movements sluggish. "They've been drugged," Alan said angrily. A voice came from behind them. "Of course they have. It's the only way to control such beasts." They turned to see Commander Shrix and 4 armed Phyrexians. "Your primitive methods of bonding and trust are interesting but inefficient," Shrix continued. "We have faster ways to create weapons." "They're not weapons," Alan said. "They're intelligent beings." Shrix laughed. "Intelligence makes them better weapons. We've already begun the process of breaking their will." Laura raised her weapon. "Release them now." "I think not," Shrix replied. "In fact, you'll be joining them as test subjects. We want to understand how you formed your initial connection." Before the Phyrexians could move, a tremendous crash shook the building. The adult Pyrean had smashed through the roof, sending debris everywhere. In the confusion, Kate and Zach fired at the control panel for the energy cages. The barriers flickered and died. The young Pyreans were weak but free. Ember saw Alan and moved toward him, stumbling slightly. "We need to get them out of here," Alan shouted over the chaos. The adult Pyrean landed beside them, keeping the Phyrexians at bay with small bursts of plasma. One by one, the humans helped the young Pyreans climb onto its back. "You can't take them," Shrix shouted, firing his weapon. The shot missed, hitting a support beam instead. The building began to collapse around them. Laura grabbed Alan's arm. "We have to go now." Alan climbed onto the adult Pyrean's back, joining the others. The creature spread its wings and launched upward through the hole in the roof just as the chamber caved in behind them. As they flew away from the moon, they saw Galactic Council ships arriving, surrounding what remained of the Phyrexian base. Ember, though weak, pressed close to Alan. The young Pyrean made a soft, rumbling sound that seemed to express gratitude. "You're safe now," Alan said, stroking its scales. "We won't let anyone hurt you again." The adult Pyrean carried them all back toward NGC 7729. As they approached the planet, they could see dozens of other Pyreans flying up to meet them. The creatures circled around them, not in threat, but in welcome. "They know," Laura said in awe. "They know we helped save their young." Alan nodded, watching the majestic creatures fly alongside them. "This isn't just about taming them anymore. It's about partnership." As they descended toward their camp, the sky filled with Pyrians of all sizes, their scales glittering in the sunlight like 1,000 flying jewels. 2 weeks after the rescue, the human camp on NGC 7729 had changed completely. What was once a small research outpost was now a busy center of activity. Pyrians of all sizes landed and took off throughout the day. Dr. Alan Foster and his team worked tirelessly, treating more Pyrians for the parasites and learning to communicate better with them. Captain Laura Wright stood with Cell Thorne, watching as Alan and Kate worked with 5 young Pyrians, teaching them to respond to different sound patterns. The council is in shock. Hexel Thorne admitted, "What you've accomplished here was thought impossible." "Sometimes it helps to try the impossible," Laura replied with a smile. A large ship appeared in the sky, bearing Earth's symbol. It landed near the camp, and Admiral John Perez stepped out. He was a tall man with gray hair and a serious face. "Captain Wright," he greeted her. "Earth Command sent me to see these creatures for myself." The reports seemed unlikely. Laura led Admiral Perez through the camp. His eyes widened as he saw humans and Pyrians working side by side. Some Pyrians were helping to move heavy equipment, while others flew overhead carrying supplies between different areas. "This is Dr. Foster," Laura said, introducing Alan. He made the first connection with Ember. As if hearing its name, Ember landed nearby and approached Alan, gently nudging his shoulder in greeting. "Remarkable," Admiral Perez whispered. Alan stroked Ember's scales. "We've been studying the ruins of the settlements that the Pyrians attacked. We found something interesting." He led them to a tent filled with artifacts and old technology. "These devices," Alan explained, pointing to strange metal objects, "are over 10,000 years old according to our tests. They show images of Pyrians and another species working together." "What species?" Admiral Perez asked. "We don't know. They're extinct now. But these images suggest the Pyrians were once partners with them, not wild creatures." Alan showed them stone carvings depicting Pyrians carrying structures and helping build cities. "There's more," Alan continued. "The parasites affecting the Pyrians. They're not natural. They were engineered by someone." A screen showed microscopic images of the parasites, with unnatural geometric patterns in their cellular structure. "An ancient enemy of this planet created these parasites to turn the Pyrians aggressive," Alan explained. "They've been suffering for thousands of years." Cahill Thorne stepped forward. "The Council had fragments of this history in our archives. The species that lived here was called the Elteri. They were peaceful builders who formed a partnership with the native Pyrians. When a rival species couldn't defeat them in war, they created a biological weapon. These parasites." Laura looked shocked. "You knew this?" "Not fully," Hexel Thorne admitted. "Only pieces. The Elteri were wiped out in the resulting chaos when the Pyrians became aggressive. The Council marked this planet as dangerous and forgot the true story over time." "So the Pyrians weren't always like this," Admiral Perez said thoughtfully. "They were guardians." Alan nodded. "And they could be again. We've already treated almost 50 Pyrians. They're intelligent, gentle when not affected by the parasites, and incredibly helpful." One of the largest Pyrians they had seen yet landed at the edge of the camp. It was at least 70 meters long, with deep blue scales that shimmered in the sunlight. Everyone fell silent as it approached. "That's the eldest," Alan said quietly. "We call her Azure. She seems to be their leader." Azure lowered her massive head until it was level with the humans. Her eyes, large and intelligent, studied each of them in turn. Then she made a rumbling sound and dropped something from her mouth onto the ground. It was a large crystal, glowing with inner light. "A gift," Alan explained, carefully picking it up. "They've been bringing these from deep in the mountains. We think they were part of the Elteri technology." Admiral Perez watched as Azure gently nuzzled Alan's shoulder, then took off into the sky. "I came here expecting to shut down a dangerous mission," the Admiral said. "Instead, I'll be reporting that we've made the most important alliance in human history. 1 year had passed since the humans first landed on NGC 7729. The planet looked very different now. A small city had grown where the original camp once stood. Humans and Pyrians moved about together in harmony. Tall buildings designed to accommodate both species rose against the purple sky. Dr. Alan Foster stood on a platform overlooking the valley. Ember, no longer a young Pyrian but nearly full-grown, rested beside him. Its scales shimmered in the sunlight, healthy and bright after a year without parasites. "Hard to believe how far we've come," Captain Laura Wright said, joining Alan on the platform. "The Elteri would be proud," Alan replied, looking at the restored ruins nearby. "Their partners are guardians once again." Over the past year, they had treated all the Pyrians on the planet for the parasites. As the creatures returned to their natural temperament, they helped the humans rebuild the ancient Elteri cities. The crystals the Pyrians brought from the mountains powered these settlements with clean energy, just as they had thousands of years ago. A large galactic council ship descended from the clouds. It was bigger and more ornate than any council vessel they had seen before. "The High Council members," Laura said. "Right on time." Down in the main square, a platform had been prepared for the ceremony. Hundreds of humans who had come from Earth stood on one side. On the other side, dozens of Pyrians of all sizes waited patiently. In the middle, representatives from 15 different alien species from across the galaxy gathered. The council ship landed, and 7 figures emerged. Zelforn led them to the platform where Admiral Perez and Dr. Foster waited with Azure, the eldest Pyrian. "We are gathered today," Zelforn announced, "to formally recognize NGC 7729 as a joint human-Pyrian colony and to welcome both species as full members of the Galactic Council." Cheers erupted from the crowd. Azure let out a gentle rumble that the other Pyrians echoed. The High Chancellor of the Council, a tall being with 4 arms, stepped forward. "For too long, the Council turned away from this world and its inhabitants. We forgot our duty to help all sentient life. Humans reminded us of this duty when they did what we thought impossible." Admiral Perez accepted a glowing orb that symbolized Council membership. "On behalf of Earth, we are honored to join the Council. But the true heroes are the Pyrians, who suffered for thousands of years, yet still found the capacity to trust again." Ellen translated the Admiral's words into Pyrian sounds. Azure dipped her massive head in acknowledgement, then used her snout to touch the orb, accepting membership for her kind as well. "The Pyrian Human Coalition is now established," Zelforn declared, "the first of its kind in Council history." After the ceremony, Alan climbed onto Ember's back. They soared high above the celebration, looking down at the mixture of species mingling below. Several other humans were also flying with their Pyrian partners, the special harnesses glinting in the sunlight. Lieutenant Zach Miller and Officer Kate Donovan flew up beside them on their own Pyrian companions. "Race you to the mountains," Zach called. Alan laughed and patted Ember's neck. The Pyrian understood and accelerated, shooting forward with incredible speed. As they flew over the vast forests and mountains of NGC 7729, Alan thought about how fear had kept the galaxy from helping these magnificent creatures. It took human curiosity and compassion to see past that fear. In the distance, a group of young Pyrians played in the clouds, free from pain and aggression. Near the horizon, a new Earth ship was landing, bringing more settlers eager to live alongside their Pyrian neighbors. Alan spotted a familiar figure waiting on a mountain peak. It was Azure. The elder Pyrian had a small human child sitting between her wings, the daughter of one of the scientists. The child was laughing with pure joy as Azure gently glided through the air. "That's the future," Alan said to Ember, who rumbled in agreement. As the triple suns of NGC 7729 began to set, casting orange and purple lights across the landscape, Alan knew that this was just the beginning. Humans had not just tamed the feared Pyrians. They had healed them, befriended them, and in doing so, changed the course of galactic history. No other species would have dared, but humans did it anyway.